This is Manchester Voices, a podcast run by students at the University of Manchester.
Hi and welcome to Manchester Voices. My name is Charlotte Riley. I'm your host today, a third year PhD student doing my PhD in chemistry, and I'm joined today by two other PhD students at the University of Manchester.
Hi, I'm Lishan. I'm a second year PhD student. I'm in nursing department, and my subject is focused about healthy aging, which is develop and exercise for the older to prevent their fall.
And I'm Mahesh and a third year PhD student in the philosophy department, and I'm doing on Susan Stebbing and her neglect or her marginalizing in both the critical thinking and informal logic spheres.
Okay. And then a bit about my research. So as I mentioned, I'm a chemist. I'm an organometallic chemist, which means I work with kind of complexes that contain metals. Mine specifically are gold. I'm developing materials which emit light to be used in organic light-emitting diodes that are more energy efficient than the ones we currently use. So I got into my research because I did some courses during my undergrad, and I found the organometallic and synthesis the most interesting. And so that's how I kind of looked for my PhD project, and I ended up where I am now. How did you find your research? Was it something that you always enjoyed, or what was your journey to get there?
My journey was a bit of a hectic one. So I started off my bachelor's in information systems, and then I did my master's in business administration. So to get to philosophy, well, one day during the COVID times, the very dark times we call it, right? Because it was not easy. So luckily, while I was working as an IT consultant, I got a bit of time off. So I'd work from 7 in the morning, ended up at 3 in the morning. So the rest of the evening was free. So I kind of really maximized on time efficiency during COVID. So incidentally, there was an open session at the University of Manchester where they were having different and specialized areas coming in. And then at the time, I kind of met my now supervisor. So she was actually talking about Susan Stebbing, the paper she was working on at the time. I got interested, and then when the Q&A sessions opened on the prospective students, and I just asked one question, like, can an IT consultant get into philosophy at any time? And she was like, yes, but only problem, you have to work really hard. But then, yeah, that's how I ended up from IT business to philosophy.
Wow, that's a big change. How did you find transitioning, so in terms of the background knowledge of philosophy? Because I did a whole degree in chemistry before moving into a PhD. And I mean, granted, there's a lot of knowledge from my undergrad that I don't use day to day now. So how did you kind of choose what stuff to learn, what stuff to miss out, and what was that experience like?
That's actually really interesting and a good question. So my first year usually is like trying to find your area way around your PhD. But mine was the first year was on catching up on the bachelor's and the master's work. So it totally went opposite of a PhD student. So in the mornings and the afternoons, I'd go for lectures. And then in the evening, when I have a little bit more time towards the night time and the evening is when I'd actually focus on my PhD, like trying to find which areas I actually wanted to develop and finding out where her neglect was. So it took a flip side for me. So I was like on a multi-course, but towards the second year and now third year, I'm quite confident on the areas I work.
I mean, obviously it was a really stressful and hard thing to go through, but a little bit jealous because now I look at undergrads and I see how they go to lectures and, you know, maybe they complain, maybe they don't always go to them. And I think now being a bit older and doing my research, I look at how fun learning is and actually being able to go to lectures. So I think maybe having that experience of being able to go to those philosophy lectures when you really had a motivator and a drive to do it was quite a fun experience in a way. I mean, obviously quite stressful and overwhelming at times, I imagine, but also it would be nice to have a focus like that.
Yeah, it's more comprehensive, I suppose. Like you get to go to lectures and you get to go through that bachelor's and the master's experience. And you're right, it's quite fun actually. It's much more ongoing also. Like I wish like actually PhD's programs actually do let the students go, you know, to experience in their specialized areas, because you kind of tend to forget what you learn at the bachelor's and the master's when you can get into PhD, unless the areas were already specialized. And like if
Yeah.
you want to go back and revisit those lectures, it's really helpful where it kind of interlocks
Yeah.
the areas.
I think you can go to the lectures. I would probably, I think I struggle with, I would have the intention to go, but then I get so caught up in the research and doing other things that it
That's
slips
true.
down priority list. So what about your research? How did you choose to go into the field of aging?
Before I did my PhD, I actually worked in the hospital for 3 years, and I've been in different department. The latest one is the newborn baby. But when I look up because I really want to go to University of Manchester, and I look up the website and I saw, they're really good at the healthy aging. And also that time was my grandma, she done like a surgery about her knee. So she's not really good at recovering, and she didn't want to walk and do any exercise at all. So her body condition is getting worse and worse. And then I kind of like I wanted to do a exercise program to actually help her, and then connect into my research data. So that's why I choosing this.
That's really interesting. So day to day, is your life a lot of working with clinics or reading papers, interacting with people? What's your kind of, or maybe a better question would be an average week rather than a day. How much time do you think you spend doing different things?
Well, because I'm a second year in a 4-year program, so basically my second year will be mainly focused on the writing for the systematic review, but I also help with my supervisor to do her project. So I sometimes I mainly stay in the office to do the typing, but also I would go to the community to recruit the participant and do the physical test assessment for them and talk with the people. And I prefer that way than the paperwork.
I can see, yeah.
because you can tell that how different between the generation thinking. And the older, they're like they have all things happens in their life, so they're kind of like chill and don't really care about the rest of it. And when I talking to them, they're so nice. I think it's because of the people that willing to participate in the project. They're also like open and they wanted to talk to you, and just made me realize that no matter how hard you do in your life when you're still young, you spend most of your time doing the thing you want to achieve something, but in the end your health is the most important thing.
I think that sounds like a really useful experience to have during your PhD, because I don't know if you experience this, but I can sometimes find it's quite an insular experience. You're either on your own or you're surrounded by people who are doing the same thing as you. So I think your experience of actually going into a community and having to interact with people, it must be a really nice way to be grounding, and in a way it's motivational for you for your work, but also probably quite motivational to look after yourself and have a good work-life balance, so that you can also age in the same way that you see people around you. So do you find, I don't know, I think something that I learned during my PhD, talking on what you said about community and mixing with different people, something that I think I had to learn in the first couple of years of my PhD was making the effort to make friends outside of my immediate PhD office or the department, just for my own well-being, to be able to get through it and keep everything in perspective. What kind of things do you do to kind of look after yourselves during your PhD, or what do you think is the biggest challenges that you're facing or currently trying to work out how to keep a balance and look after yourselves?
Probably maintaining a healthy work-life balance. So here's
Do
the
you
key.
do that?
I try to. So here's the thing. If I had like a very stressful week, for instance, I try to go out at least in Manchester. Worst case, I go outside. So I kind of use the Schengen visa to go to European countries. So I've actually gone to about 5 countries throughout the last year, so it kind of helps to balance. So I am an avid hiker, so I like to hike in the mountains, so that kind of breaks away from your stressful research. But here's the thing, research is actually not stressful if you enjoy. So
That's so true.
so it kind of sets the balance on its own sometimes. Like there are days when you try to focus to see whether you can find that particular research, and there are days which you don't end up finding. You work for about 3 days and you're like, I haven't found what I was looking for, but still you still learn something out of it, at least surrounding the surrounding themes. So it's not stressful in that way. It's like it does give a, sort of a life balance on its own if you really look at it. So there are ups and there are downs, but it kind of balances you out too. What about you?
I agree with you completely, because I think I really enjoy and love my research.
Mm-hmm.
And when I reflect back on where the stresses have come from and the things that I found difficult, a lot of them have been in how I've responded to people around me, or things that are more to do with me than the actual research itself. And I think it's actually been a really good opportunity for me to learn what I enjoy and how I relax and what is a work-life balance. So for some people, they might think that a work-life balance is working really hard Monday to Friday and then doing nothing at the weekends.
Yeah.
Whereas I know that for me, I don't find sitting doing nothing relaxing.
Yeah.
What I might find relaxing is going and finishing off a bit of research that I hadn't got done, or working up a reaction, looking at something, and then being able to relax, feeling satisfied from that. But also having hobbies, like you said, hiking, stuff to get you out, do more interesting things. But what about you? What is your...
Well, I always talk with friends in the office. We always talk about there's no life balance at all with the PhD. Because you basically, like, PhD is part of your life already.
It is, I think you're right, it's a lifestyle.
Yeah, so you don't really think, you need to take a break from it. No, you need to squeeze your time to do some of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, it sort of comes naturally, I suppose.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. I suppose there's the flexibility of, because it isn't like a job in the sense you don't have strict hours. You can work at any time, but also you always can be working.
Yeah.
And so I think I've had to really learn to use the flexibility to think, well, actually, I really want to see a friend this weekend. They're quite a long way away. Won't go into work on Friday. I'll do Friday, Saturday, Sunday, seeing a friend. And then for my own sake, I might then work the next weekend, because it gives me the balance to be able to kind of work around that. And that makes me feel good, and it works for me.
Yeah.
But also there is, I think, a chance of it just becoming work.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Have both of you taken a proper break? Like, I go on vacations and then I come in the evening and then I quickly do some, reading.
Same.
It's kind of inbuilt, I suppose.
No, I think
No, you take a break, okay.
I take a break. I go on holiday. I think, is your partner also doing a PhD in research?
No, he's doing a full-time job in
Full-time.
financial institutions, so he's the totally opposite of me.
Because I have my partner is not in the world of academia, and for me that makes it easier to take a break, because when we go on holiday,
Agreed.
if I started to try and do work, it would be kind of, you're on holiday. I don't even take my laptop with me. I find it quite easy to log off. Especially if I'm geographically away. I think if I was at home in my flat, I would struggle with that. But I do find that when I go on a break, I will just out of sight, out of mind it.
Yeah, I'm guilty then. My one is like, okay, she's reading again after a long hike. That's okay, let her be, just read.
I suppose also it depends on the nature of your research, because mine is...
So
mine's chemistry. Most of my research is in the lab.
Right.
I can't really be doing that at home.
Yes, you can't.
I'd probably get on some sort of watch list if I started bringing chemicals home. So but there is, I think the nature of that research means that it does enforce a kind of balance on you. And I suppose you can't be doing outreach at all hours.
But we also have to do a lot of paper thing.
Okay.
So that's why it depends. So now I'm focused on my continuation report. I think you already finished. So I'm still focusing now, but I wanted to have a holiday after it. So I'm kind of working so hard and no weekends at all. But just like the balance between me is like I work so hard this period, and then I will I'm gonna take a completely break after it.
Yes.
Yeah.
But here's another thing. So suppose you have you're on holiday.
Yeah.
You take a hike. And then you kind of let go on a piece that you've already been working. After the hike, you come back with a fresh pair of eyes and there's something I didn't see previously.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
that kind of helps too.
I don't know, something that I think I've really had to learn as well is learning how to sit with things that take a lot of time. I really love the lab work, and the stuff with the lab work is you go in the morning and you don't have something, and then often by the end of the day you have made something physical that you can touch and see, and you get that kind of instant feedback of productivity. Whereas with stuff that's more writing based, I guess like both of yours, writing takes a long time sometimes, and you can sit there for a whole day and you end up with a paragraph. And sometimes I think it can be really difficult to sit there and actually make yourself know that, it might take you 3 hours and you're not going to really get anywhere, but you have to go through that in order to make the progress. I think it's a useful skill to have as well,
true.
because you learn a
Yeah.
lot of patience through it. I
Yes.
have a lot of admiration for people
Yeah.
who do that kind of research.
Oh, but here's a cross question. So how do you manage your work in the lab? Do you like have specific hours or specific days you go into the lab?
Yeah, so I know that I'm someone who works well with a schedule.
Oh,
And so especially when I'm in more of a synthesis phase, there's times of my life where I'm doing more writing and there's time where there's more synthesis. When I'm doing synthesis, I like to get to the lab at kind of 8:30 in the morning.
right.
And the rest of my research group is they're not early birds. So I get quite a bit of time kind of sorting stuff out on my own. There's a couple of other people around, but it's quite quiet. And I'm very productive in those times. So I tend to kind of do lab stuff from 8 until 4, 5 sometimes. It depends on the day and how long the reaction takes. Sometimes you can go in with a plan of, I will do this for this many hours. While this is working, I'll do something else. But then you start doing your reaction, you check it after 6 hours and it's not done. And then you have to kind of think, am I going to stay later? Am I going to leave it overnight? So I tend with lab work, I'm quite structured. And then with writing, I think as I'm moving into my 3rd year, I'm doing a lot more writing and I'm having to learn how that works for me. And so usually depending on my mood and how noisy the office is, I do try to stick to those core hours. And then when I'm at home, that's home time for like friends, partner, family.
That's true.
Yeah.
You kind of need to, that's true, I suppose. You
Yeah.
kind of need to break off at the time because then they're like, okay, so you just went to the department, come back home and you're like, what? Working again? No.
Yeah.
You need to
I
break
think
off.
also sometimes, because like you said, it's a lifestyle, it's integrated in your life. I'm often thinking about my research in the back of my head a lot of time anyway. So even if it's something like I'm preparing a presentation, I'm probably in my head planning those slides, thinking what the story of it's going to be. It doesn't look like I'm working. It looks like I'm sat staring out a window with a cup of coffee, but
That's still your
it's
brain
your brain's still going. And I quite like that about it, but I imagine it could be quite overwhelming.
It's nice that it's what Li Cheng said. I think it kind of gets interwoven into your head, and it's nice. So like you're relaxing, but you're also right thinking of it at the same time. What about for you, the community work? Do you have like specific times or days?
Because the one that I go to community is helping my supervisor one, so is specific day to go. But if I after this year I would do my own research, I have to go to community by myself. Yeah, so there is no limit time. So I just go if they're available. I just go. But now it's like in the office writing. I basically will be in the office Monday to Friday.
Yeah.
Sometimes weekend. But just try not to work at home because, as you say, you have to make a boundary between.
Yeah, and have a bit of a. Yeah, I think something that I do as well, I always make sure that I cook a dinner or something, and that to me marks a big separation between work and home.
Yeah.
And it's like once I'm back home and I'm in the kitchen and I'm doing something, I suppose in a way it's still chemistry, which is probably why I like it so much. But it
Because
to
you're
me,
still
I'm still making
ingredients,
stuff, but it's a big separation for me of like having a bit of a work-life balance. But also, like you said, when you're doing a PhD, it's a piece of research that you've chosen to do for 3 years of your life. So we all chose these subjects because we're interested in them. The fact that you get to do that for 3.5 years, not many people get to do that. Every day we wake up and we choose what we want to do that day and how we're going to set our day up. And I think there's so much freedom in that. And so, okay, there are a couple of sacrifices in terms of it might bleed into other aspects of your life. But I do think it's worth it.
Yes. Like the overall, the satisfaction is like these 3 years. So like I've been working for 7 years straight on.
Yeah.
But the freedom now is like, it's on a whole new level. You're right. So it's like, it's not because we are contributing something back into the society as well. Like for now, I'm doing like summer schools when I'm trying to educate people, underprivileged students with my supervisor. So we have these sessions for like week. And then trying to partner with a charity organization as well. So giving back to the society of what you're learning already is actually really worthwhile. Like it ties into your practical aspect with the community as well, isn't it?
I think it's like get a positive feedback from them. It's really like motivating.
So obviously both of you, I went straight from doing my master's into a PhD. Both of you had proper real jobs in the real world before coming back. What do you think was there a big shock? How was it making that transition, I guess, back into student mode?
For me, I prefer to be a student mood, and because the work I've been done there is stressful, and then you have to deal with the patient problem, and then you saw a lot of people dying, and so
Whereas do you find with the PhD?
I found it's like I can do the thing that I really like. So like
Yeah.
motivated, I was like, yeah, I'm going to the office. Perfect.
It's fun. It's
Yeah.
an enjoyable experience. Yeah.
I was anyway interested in research. I kind of needed to find the little edge which would switch me on from the proper work
Yeah.
mode
Yeah.
to the research, and now it's been like, it's kind of exhilarating in a way. Like,
Yeah.
at least I see my partner like, she's going back to the department, and it's like, you look happy. Yes, I'm going to work on my research. So it's like
Yeah.
that. So it kind of gives a positive vibe off. So it's not just, you are doing a PhD and it's boring, or that's
Yeah.
what people think more or less. But
Yeah.
it's not. It's very interesting day-to-day life itself. I mean, we learn a lot of things,
Yeah.
Yeah.
knowledge-wise.
I think as well it's really important, especially having conversations like this, interdisciplinary, talking to people who are actually really enjoying themselves. Because also there will be, there are times at the PhD where you do want to whinge about it and have a moan, and it is difficult. But I think to actually have the conversations with people where everyone talks about what they enjoy about it is really valuable. Because I think it's also important for other people to see that and know that there's people have, in my experience, either sort of no idea what a PhD is, and they think that I'm still a student and go out partying all the time, or they think it's this really, really hard thing that's inaccessible and you have to be super clever to do. And it's actually kind of somewhere between that. If you do have freedom and you get to choose what you do every day, but it is also challenging and hard, but that's part of what makes it fun and satisfying. And I think the personality types that enjoy it and thrive in that environment will enjoy a PhD.
Yeah.
It's not as much of a, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't feel it's as academically, it's not exam based,
Yeah.
it's all
that's
about
true.
perseverance and logic and how you think and presenting ideas rather than memorizing loads of facts.
It kind of comes back to what Steve Jobs said, like, love what you do. Like, if you really want to get through the PhD, you have to really from the start to the end, you have to maintain that interest, that drive to get your research area, thriving. Because we are not just doing the PhD, we are thinking about the contribution.
Yes.
Most of the time, to see what we can contribute in our own specific field. It's interesting that people get to see the work we do actually satisfies, motivates us. It's like a journey of discovery in a way.
Yes.
Like, we start from zero knowledge. I are trying to fill this gap. In my case, it's the analytic philosophy, and you see a gap, and then you're trying to fill it with the contributions along the way of what she did. It's kind of motivating on its own. Same for both of you, I suppose, the journey of discovery.
And I think also the act of, I had a couple of papers that I've published, and that was a really big deal for me. It made me, I felt so proud, and I think it was quite, I don't think I was expecting to care as much as I did. I sort of went to the PhD, I might get a couple of papers, but actually the process of doing the research is fun, and I have a good time in the lab, and I find the writing more challenging and difficult, and I've got better at it. But to have gone through the journey of, writing the first draft of a paper that was terrible, and my supervisor pointing that out to me, and then, revising that and it ending up being published, and there is something incredibly satisfying about being able to kind of send a PDF of your paper to your friends and say, look what I've done, isn't it cool? It is, I think, to have something, you feel so much ownership over it, and you've created something. It's really exciting. Even if it's just a really small part of a field, it is new knowledge. What are you guys thinking about doing post-PhD? Or is that a question that shouldn't be asked? Because I hate it when people ask it to me.
That's one of those questions. So, no, but I'd still like to continue doing research. Probably end up being a research associate at the university, hopefully. Yeah.
Yeah, same. I kind of like that because you can do your own time. You can choose whatever you want, whenever you wanted to do. and then you can do the fun thing.
And it's not just research, so it's going to come back to your networking skills. So it's kind of a whole round experience, not just research, but you get to network, you get to present, then you get to have comments, feedback back into the papers, for instance. So it gives kind of an overall experience.
Yeah.
It's a bit more of a fun job, I'd suppose. It's not a typical 9-to-5 job, but then because it's not time bound, it's interesting on its own accord. That way.
I think so.
Again, I suppose it comes back to being more of a lifestyle than just a job.
Yes. And you can even do the postdocs in another country. That gives a totally different experience.
Yeah.
You're out of, maybe in Europe, then it's like a whole new lifestyle adaptation, different people you meet, different people you network.
Thinking about that because the weather here is terrible.
That's true.
One fun fact we love on Manchester.
It's always raining. I think something else is written down here, a question that's coming from Instagram that we should probably address, because the people clearly want to hear the answer. It says, I'm thinking about a PhD. How do I get started? So I think we all cover different areas here, and I imagine that the different processes for humanities or STEM. So how would you give this person some advice?
First thing I'd tell this person is to go have a look at the university website. So you have the postgraduate courses on which particular course you want to do. And then once you select that particular area, go back and read to the potential. Anyway, you have to select a potential supervisors, 2 supervisors at least the minimum. So you have to go back and read their research areas, which research areas they would take students in.
Yeah.
And then after that, do attend one of the university open sessions. Highly recommended, because it gives you an idea of the supervisors themselves speak on these particular areas which they talk. So you can actually decide whether to work on ethics or whether to work on analytic philosophy or informal logic. So you have areas to select from. After that, once you think you've selected the potential supervisors, right, after reading on their background, do send the introductory emails to them.
That's so important.
Yeah. So in the introductory emails, you have to say what the intention to do. You need not have very concrete research ideas. At least in my case, it was I wanted to do something on Susan Stebbing, very general. And I knew that she was talking about this concept of the whole personality. So I wanted to bring in this emotional aspect to it on a different note. So that's how I started my, talking to my supervisor. And in the introductory mail, it was very draft. And then she kind of helped me to get the proper draft proposal, which I then submitted to the university.
Yeah.
So the supervisors themselves, if they'd potentially like to take you on, they would help you to your proposals, which you would then submit as an application onto the university.
I think that's such an important piece of advice about the supervisor, because your supervisor, I think there's 3 things to a PhD. There's the topic, the place, and the supervisor. And to kind of begin to thinking about those 3 things and working out what you're interested in, where you want to do it, and looking at people and reaching out to them, like you said, in an email, because the relationship that you have with your supervisor can really define your whole PhD experience. And so be really thoughtful when you're doing that, and try and have informal conversations with them to see what it's like. Scott Dean, who's the head of PGR experience, I think, in our faculty, always describes the relationship as kind of like a marriage that lasts for 3 years. In that, it'll be up and down, it can be a bit tense at times, but it's a quite intense relationship, and the dynamics shift a lot. So I would suggest that people really just consider that, and consider the kind of supervision that you would, if you get to the point of deciding you want to do a PhD and you know what you want to do it in, thinking about what you're like as a person and what kind of supervision would work best for you, because there's loads of different supervisor styles. I'm sure the 3 of us have very different interactions with our supervisors, because it's just how it is.
The intro email is really important. You can tell by the email how the supervisor style would be, and how you communicate. If it has some chemistry, it would be better, which means that you work really well. So from my experience, my supervisor is Professor Crystal. So I sent an email to him at first, and he replied to me really friendly and really good. So I was like, okay, it's perfect. And then he was kind of introduced me to my co-supervisor, the Helen. Helen's really supportive. We have a meeting, informal meeting, and she's really friendly. I was like, okay, I'm gonna get this one.
Yeah, because I think there's some people, I know people who have supervisors where they have a really formal relationship and they see them maybe once a month, and that really works well for them. Or there's people who, I'm my supervisor's first PhD student, so I see quite a lot of him. He has a lot of time for me. And so it's a very different experience to other PhDs where, you know, your supervisor's quite far off in an office and you don't see them, whereas mine often knows what I'm up to on a day-to-day basis. What do you think was the biggest surprise for you? Was there anything that you weren't expecting to be challenging going into your PhD that became a problem?
No, maybe the biggest surprise for me was catching up. That I had so much to catch up on the undergrads and the masters, and the entire language of philosophy was totally different to one I've known. Like even the words now, in philosophy, even one word can make a difference to the entire sentence, and you have to be very careful on the way you write, the way you pitch the sentence, for instance. That was a bit of a surprise. Like I knew I had to do a lot of work, but the art of writing a philosophy paper, for instance, was very different, and that took a bit of time for me to improve at least my writing style. Writing as a philosopher is different. Because I remember like my CV got changed a lot over time. So I started with an IT business background, and now it's slowly getting into the academic side. I actually have to thank a lot to my supervisor, Dr. Frederick. Like she helped me a lot, including my co-supervisor. So both my supervisors in the university itself. So, and they were very welcoming in that they kind of really helped to, they didn't allow me to feel like I was a new person coming into a new area of work, and they'd always think like, you know, you can do this somehow or the other.
Yeah.
The positivity from the supervisors themselves actually do establish your success towards getting you to where you are. Now I'm comfortable, but I remember going back. Like the first year I was like very scared, like am I even doing the right thing by even, you know, because Manchester University is anyway a prestigious university, so you anyway have like, you know, a kind of a stress coming in, like, you know, okay, am I going to survive here? But that's why the way you said was right actually. The supervisor's relationship do hold a big standpoint in you completing and even motivating you to get those tasks done on a daily basis, and frequent supervisions. Yes, it's a bonus. Yeah.
We're in a big office. I think a peer support is also important to me. So we have like a big group, and then we're from different subjects. Some of them are psychology, and then we always talking something outside the PhD. We have a party together, we go picnic together, and then sometimes you're stuck in one of the problem, you just go talk with them, and they will like give you some suggestion, and then just like, oh, everyone are the same. You're not the only person that's stuck in some of the point, and you will feel like, oh, I'm not alone.
I think for so many people they'd assume that a PhD looks like someone sat in an office doing lots of research or just locked in a lab, but actually what we do on a day-to-day basis, I mean, it varies so much by experience, but it's also so interesting and so much shaped by what you want to do with your time.
I love my PhD life.
I
think it's like a
that's
privilege.
a soundbite. I love it so much.
Yeah, I love
That's
it so
going to be
much.
the tagline. So in one sentence, if you would summarize your PhD experience, it would be, we really like what we do. I mean,
Definitely.
It's not just work anymore. It's technically across the boundary. I mean, like you wake up in the morning, you're like, what do you want to do? Yes, we're working on the research, and we want to come to office or do from home.
And I think for the sake of transparency, I would also acknowledge that sometimes it isn't always like that. And I would say I definitely myself go through cycles of being incredibly motivated and excited. And then there also will be periods where I'm still turning up, and I still make myself turn up every day and do something and make a little bit of progress. But there are days that aren't as enthusiastic and fun. But also I think something that you learn during your PhD is that literally just turning up and doing a little bit moves you closer to the end goal every time you do it. And it is still worth it on those days where it isn't super fun. But most of the time, it is. But even, I would say actually, even on those days where I don't feel super motivated or I'm struggling with something, I still find the research fundamentally interesting.
So I guess that's why it's kind of a journey. So you have good days and then you have bad. It kind of nicely balances. Most of it is good. That's true.
I think what you said about, when I started the PhD, a family friend, so one of my mum's closest friends did a PhD. She did it slightly later in life. And she gave a bit of advice to me that I always think about because I think it's really true. And it was that a PhD is divided into thirds, where a third of the time you're loving it, it's amazing. A third of the time it's neutral and you're just getting on. And then a third of the time you're sort of thinking, God, why am I putting myself through this? And she says, as long as it kind of keeps on those third balances, because there will be times where it's hard, because it's a really, there's a reason that not everyone does a PhD, because it is hard. But as long as you kind of keep those balance of thirds, everything's kind of on track and it's going to be okay.
Like, there are days when you're trying to find this one piece of information. You spend 3 days trying to find it and you still don't find it. Like, oh no, now what? What's
Or
the
it's
new
worse
backup
when
plan?
you know that you found it before, but you forgot to save it. And now you have to re-find it.
Same. Sometimes you have to find exactly the sentence that supports your idea. Spend the whole morning, and then come up with one sentence in the writing.
Sometimes to get to that sentence, then you have to go through an entire process of finding information, collecting information, putting it into the right order. But that's kind of fun on its own. And you're like, yes, I got this one.
Yeah, I think if you
get it,
if you can enjoy the process,
Yeah.
if you're the kind of person who can really get into enjoying the process of something, a PhD is a really satisfying thing to do.
And also you can do something else except the PhD. So you can do your research, and then you have a spare time and energy to do something else. Like I also doing the teaching assistant, and I found it's really interesting. I've never done anything like this. And
What year do you teach?
I do the GTA, so the undergraduate student, but not my nursing department. It's in psychology department.
Okay.
Yours is kind of like different area.
Yeah.
And I found this quite interesting because I did my undergraduate in China, not here. It's completely different for the people in here. I think they're more get used to the academia area earlier than the Chinese student, because we don't normally do assignments in China as an undergraduate. So they done their assignment, essay, even on their first year. And they're quite have their own idea about what it is. They know what exactly they're doing. But for the Chinese student, we only know something about what the teacher told us.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and we don't really have too much time to do something we really like as undergraduate student in China. But here, like people, you can join the community, the clubs in the university. You got a lot of things, and then it's kind of fun for me. Like the student union, they actually have a lot of students in there, and then they actually do something, make a difference between the university.
Yeah.
I also need to do the seminar with the student.
So I suppose you're learning how to teach.
Yeah.
At the same time as teaching.
Yeah.
That must be really satisfying.
It's stressful, but it's satisfying.
I do a bit of teaching in the undergraduate labs as well. So they put the first and second years are learning how to do chemistry in the labs. PhD students supervise them. And I find it really fun. Yeah. Especially, I don't know if you've had this experience when you have students who find out that you're doing a PhD and they want to ask advice, or they're interested in what your research is. I find that so fun because you get to talk to someone about your research.
Yeah.
And it's everyone, I think if you ask any researcher to talk about their research, they can go on and on for probably a little bit too long.
And you know what, another positive might be they get so interested and they're like, oh, this is something I'd want to do for my PhD as well. That is really satisfying on its own. Like,
You think you're like, when you're working on your project, you don't think it's a really big deal, but when someone said that, oh my God, yours interesting, and you're like, okay, I'm happy.
I think sometimes you can forget how interesting your research is until you explain it to someone else and they go, oh, that's really cool. And you're kind of like, yeah, it is cool.
So so the nice thing about is we can do a bit of teaching as well while doing the PhD. Yeah. So it kind of gets as an added qualification, I suppose.
Yeah, I think you can there are PhD stipends that you can apply for now that have inbuilt teaching qualifications in. So you can do I think it's 80-20 or 60-40% split research and teaching, which I know a couple of people who are doing that and they find it really satisfying. But also just generally as a PhD, I think there is an expectation that you do a bit of teaching, but it's so rewarding. You get paid for it as well.
And like sometimes that's the kind of break you need to get away from the research. Sometimes it's like, okay, you go and so you're teaching a subject that is quite related to your PhD, but then it's different in a way, like, okay, this is a good break for me. So you prepare for the seminars and then come back and do the tutorials. And also like you can have a lot of possibility to do
you can try if you like the teaching or not. If not, it's fine. You can just not choosing it after you graduate. If you like the research, you can just ask your supervisor or anything. Do they have any possibility to let you to try? And you can try it. If it's not your type, you can just and then
I suppose if it's something that you learn you've got a real passion for, there's the opportunity to really lean into the teaching and do. I think you can do up to 120 hours in a semester at Manchester. So if it's something that you're really passionate about, there's the chance to really kind of, and there are, I know the chemistry department, there are kind of teaching qualifications you can do alongside that as well. So you're not just obviously putting all this time into the teaching, you can leave with kind of some official documents that show what you've learned. It must be interesting for you as well. Have you ever had an experience of learning something from those seminars that's influenced your research or made you think about things in a different way?
Yeah. Like I had one of those. So I've initially thought philosophy of mind, which is totally different to what I'm doing. But one key concept in that, the first lecture was like, I was anyway having trouble with understanding this particular concept from Russell, one of the leading analytic philosophers. But then once I had finished the tutorial on philosophy of mind, it kind of fed back. And then when I went and met my second supervisor, I was able to understand that more, thanks to the teaching experience I've had. So
it's the best way to learn it sometimes is to teach it.
Like, then he's like, oh, okay. So, now we're getting somewhere.
It's really good. I can't, because this is the psychology I'm nursing. So it's
nursing,
completely
it's very
different. But I like psychology, so it's kind of like learning the new thing.
Yeah, that sounds really satisfying. We are all at the University of Manchester doing our postgraduates. I did my undergraduate still in the UK, but up in Durham, so I moved here for my PhD. Did you guys also, I assume, move here?
Yeah, I basically spent my whole life in China, and then I came to the UK for my master, and I back to China about a year, and then come back to the UK again.
Was your master's also at Manchester, or was it
in Birmingham?
In Birmingham,
Mine was same actually. I spent my entire lifetime in Sri Lanka. So here's the interesting part. So I had affiliations with the universities in UK, but they were taught by local tutors back in Sri Lanka. So I actually started off at the University of Westminster and then Cardiff University, and now in UK back. But it's a different experience totally, because it's more practical based now that it's a PhD. It's not theoretical, but you're like finding your way through the PhD.
What's your experience of the University of Manchester been like compared to institutions you were at before?
I did my master's during pandemic.
Oh, okay. So it was very different, Yeah.
Even if I was in UK, there's no much different. It's online courses.
Do you feel like you've settled into Manchester well as a place to live?
Definitely, because I stay here for like 2 years. And I go somewhere else all the time. At weekends, we just travel around the city, and I really like. I don't know. At first I don't like this city. At first I like this city because compared to the Birmingham.
There's no Birmingham hate.
It's just like more city, and then you've got more fun things to do here. But after the halfway on my first year, I find it's kind of stressful because my family and friends, they are all in China. So I have no one else at the beginning here. So it's kind of like lack of support, and just keep asking yourself question why you're here.
So obviously, do you think your perspective has changed now, and how did you find that sense of community and kind of from going from really struggling when you first arrived to
I think a peer support and supervisor support is really important. So I talk to them about my personal life thing, and they always give me support, and then we hang out together, and also I make friends in here. And so that it's not just me now. And I have my own community here to build up the relationship with different people. So I kind of getting used to the Manchester, and I kind of like it now.
That's really I really like that actually. I think it's almost nicer than, because I kind of came here and loved it instantly and really liked it as a city. But obviously I came here, I didn't really have any friends here when I moved, but I was familiar with the community and I was prepared for the awful weather and the impact that was going to have on me mentally. Growing up here, it's the winter, just it's not a good time. But to hear how you kind of experienced that and then found a way to make it work for you and look for the community, I think that's really important, and it should be heard about.
So here's the interesting thing. Manchester is a very welcoming city.
It is.
It is. It's different, right? So it's kind of overwhelming when you have to move from where you're living, and then you have to kind of moved to a totally different city, but both the university and the city of Manchester has been really great and trying to fill in the gap. So an interesting thing is that when you asked about the experience with uni, so like the IT support and the librarians, I have to say they've done a really big help in terms of supporting the PhD. Like if I can't find a text which I cannot find in British Library, for instance, they would get down the particular text if you write to them.
Yeah.
So in terms of support for IT and library, I think the university has done a great job. Like they are, so it's not just you're trying to fulfill your progression throughout, like your the assessment, for instance, our PhD coursework is made in such a way that we learn along the way. So you can actually see the progress you've made from, if you go back to your annual reviews in year 1 and year 2, you can see the progress you've done. And, like how confident you are. Like at the beginning when I came into Manchester, I'm like, I was so scared. The one thing which really scared me was like my peers, I knew all of them were in philosophy. And, how would they look at me coming as an IT business person, for instance? But they were very welcoming, and the fact that they sort of made you feel like a part of the community itself. It's fine, we're there, we're here for you. That support it's really helpful on top of the university experience. You're right. So the peer support comes back along with your supervisor help. Kind of does help you to become like the pillars of success when you do your PhD. So
I think it's really important what you said of if you need the help. I think it probably won't just be a University of Manchester, but in any institutions, if you're doing a PhD, that it can feel incredibly lonely, but knowing that there is the support there, you just have to go and actively sometimes look for it, or start the conversations with your friends, or, go and ask for the help to find the resource that you need, rather than, I think, struggling alone and in silence on it. It's not it's also just not productive for you as well as a person. It's not the best way to go about your research, and PhD can probably be a really fun experience. So try and do everything that you can to make it as successful as it can be.
A wholesome experience, I suppose.
Wholesome, yeah. So we should probably round this up. This has been a conversation between kind of 3 PhD students about, I suppose we've covered a lot of things about our life, our struggles, how we got into our PhD. We've really done a lot. So thank you so much for listening. I hope you found something interesting or useful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you've got a topic you want us to discuss, drop us a message on Instagram at officialuom and mention Manchester Voices. Our jingle was created by student Maisie Illul.